The Streaming and the Fury, a single scene in eternal twilight. The room existed in defiance of time itself. On the western wall, Renaissance oak panels rose toward a coffered ceiling, where painted cherubs peered down through gathering shadows. Candlelight trembled across an inkwell, a scatter of parchment and quills arranged like fallen feathers. On the eastern wall, floor-to-ceiling glass reflected the bruised purple of a London dusk, the shard piercing upward like a shard of future thrust into past, the Thames below catching the last copper of sun and the first neon of night. Between these impossible halves sat two men at a table that seemed uncertain what century it belonged to. Burnished walnut on one end, dissolving into brushed steel and glass on the other. William Shakespeare hunched over a glowing laptop, his doublet unbuttoned at the throat, ruffs wilted like dying flowers. His fingers, accustomed to the resistance of quill on vellum, hovered above the keyboard with the hesitation of a man reaching toward fire. The cursor blinked, blinked. An accusation of emptiness. "'Tis a cruel implement," he muttered, pressing a key that made the screen emit a soft, condemning beep. "It mocks the very soul of composition. Where is the scratch of thought made flesh? The ink that bleeds, intent upon the page?" Across from him, Oscar Wilde reclined in a chair of Italian leather and chrome, one leg crossed over the other with the studied carelessness of a Renaissance sculpture. He wore a velvet smoking jacket of deep plum, anachronistic and perfect, and cradled an espresso cup between long fingers. His eyes, amused, weary, infinitely knowing, watched Shakespeare's struggle with the detached interest of a cat observing a mouse attempting philosophy. "My dear Will," Wilde said, his voice carrying the musical precision of a harpsichord playing jazz, "you approach that machine as though it were Medusa herself. It's merely a typewriter with delusions of grandeur. Press the keys. Surely a man who gave voice to Hamlet can manage to summarize a protagonist in 140 characters or less." Shakespeare glared at the screen. 140 characters? I have created characters that span the breadth of human experience. The jealous Moor, the mad king, the star-crossed lovers who defy the very heavens. And you would have me reduce such complexity to, what did that woman in the severe spectacles call it? A log line? A log line, Wilde confirmed, sipping his espresso with the air of a man tasting civilization itself. The modern equivalent of your Globe Theatre's playbills, only infinitely more reductive and somehow more important. Welcome to the age of attention scarcity, where art must justify its existence in the time it takes to swipe left. The red Netflix logo on the wall pulsed softly, a beating heart of algorithms and quarterly earnings. Shakespeare rose, pacing toward the Renaissance side of the room, where his quills waited like old friends. "In my time, we wrote for groundlings and nobility alike. The blood, the poetry, the bawdy humor, all mingled in the pit. Here they speak of demographics and key quadrants, as though the human heart could be thus divided and conquered. It can be," Wilde said softly. "That's precisely the tragedy. But continue." Outside, London transformed. Office lights blinked on across the skyline like stars deciding to exist. The Ancient and the Chrome stood shoulder to shoulder. The Tower and the Gherkin, St. Paul's Dome, and the walkie-talkie's curve, a city that had learned to contain its contradictions. Shakespeare returned to the laptop, squinting at a document titled pitch_deck_V7_final_use this one.docx. "They want," he read slowly, "a fresh take on the costume drama with contemporary resonance." What manner of oxymoron is this? Wilde laughed, a sound like crystal breaking beautifully. "Ah, the eternal cry of the producer. Give us something entirely new that is exactly like everything that has succeeded before. They want Romeo and Juliet, but make them influencers. Macbeth, but the witches are podcasters. King Lear, but he's a tech billionaire dividing his startup among his daughters. And the storm is actually a Twitter scandal." "You mock." "I do. It's the only response that preserves sanity." Wilde set down his cup and leaned forward, his expression shifting into something sharper, more serious. "But you know what truly disturbs me, Will? They might be right. Perhaps every story is the same story, eternally recycled, simply wearing the costume of its age. Your plays survive not because they were timeless, but because they were so thoroughly of their time that they circle back to every time." Shakespeare stared at him. "You dare suggest my works are mere content?" "I suggest your works are the bones that all content hangs upon. There's a difference, though content does pay better." Wilde gestured toward the laptop. "Now sit. Type. We have..." He checked a device on his wrist that glowed with notifications. 3 hours until the development executive returns for our pitch, and she has the attention span of a hummingbird on cocaine, though she'd phrase it as a high-performance mindset. Shakespeare sat. His fingers found the keys. He typed, "Fade in, then stop." "What fades?" he asked the screen. "And into what?" "Into the first image," Wilde said, rising to pace along the modern side of the room, his reflection ghosting across the glass wall. The establishing shot, the visual metaphor that announces the entire thesis of the piece before a single word is spoken. Cinema is poetry written in light, Will. Surely you of all people understand that language. Shakespeare's fingers moved, slowly at first, then faster. Inn, palace, night. A throne room lit by 1,000 candles, but in the corner, a single smartphone glows blue, illuminating a young queen's face as she scrolls through subjects' grievances submitted via hashtag. Wilde circled back, reading over his shoulder. Not terrible. Derivative of about 16 other shows, but not terrible. Though 1,000 candles is imprecise. Give me a number that feels true. How can a number feel? 17, Wilde interrupted. 17 candles. Specific enough to seem real, odd enough to be interesting. Trust me. Shakespeare revised it. The cursor blinked less accusingly now. They worked. The room filled with the sound of keys clicking, the occasional scratch of quill on parchment when Shakespeare insisted on drafting dialogue by hand first, the soft jazz bleeding from speakers hidden in the walls. Outside, London's dusk deepened into night. The city lights multiplied. The ancient Thames flowed on, carrying reflections of both St. Paul's Cross and advertising screens selling trainers and crypto. The problem, Shakespeare said after an hour, pushing back from the laptop, is that you want wit where there should be weight. Every line cannot be an epigram. Every line should earn its place, Wilde countered, not looking up from the pages he was marking with a fountain pen. Your problem, dear Will, is that you confuse weight with verbosity. 10 words of perfect truth outweigh 100 of adequate emotion. My verbosity built the English language, and I'm trying to save it from death by committee and streaming algorithms. Wilde looked up. Listen to this line you wrote. Her heart, like a bird trapped in a cage of golden circumstance, beat against the bars of expectation. It's lovely. It's also 3 seconds too long for modern attention spans, and uses the cage metaphor that every writer since Dickens has exhausted unto death. Shakespeare's jaw tightened. And your alternative? She suffocated in gold. Wilde set down his pen. 4 words. The entire image compressed into a diamond. That's not reduction. It's distillation. Silence. Then Shakespeare smiled. It was not a happy smile, but it was genuine. You cruel, brilliant bastard. You're right. I usually am. It's one of my few consistent qualities. They returned to work with new energy. The collaboration shifted. Where Shakespeare reached for the grand statement, Wilde carved it into something sharp enough to cut. Where Wilde's wit grew too cold, Shakespeare warmed it with the breath of actual human feeling. The script began to live. It was a show about a family, but wasn't every show. A family of influencers whose empire of lifestyle content and motivational platitudes was built on foundations of private misery. The matriarch, a woman who preached authenticity while her every moment was choreographed. The eldest son who quoted Stoic philosophy while slowly drowning in prescription pills. The daughter whose beauty tutorials masked a hunger for something real that she couldn't name. The youngest who saw through it all and was slowly going mad from the clarity. It's King Lear, Shakespeare said. It's the picture of Dorian Gray, Wilde countered. It's both. It's all of it. Every family is every family. Now you're learning. The script grew. Pages accumulated on both screen and parchment. Shakespeare drafted entire monologues in iambic pentameter, then Wilde translated them into the staccato rhythm of text messages and Instagram captions. Wilde wrote dialogue so sharp it drew blood. Then Shakespeare reminded him that blood requires a body to bleed from, requires a heart that once beat. Time became negotiable. At some point, neither could say when, the room began to change. The boundary between Renaissance wood and modern glass blurred. The candlelight and laptop glow merged into a single illumination that was neither and both. Through the window, London's skyline twisted. The Globe Theatre materialized next to the Tate Modern, its wooden O suddenly as permanent as steel and glass. The Thames filled with both wherries and tour boats, their wakes crossing in impossible patterns. And in the air around them, scenes from their script began to manifest. Translucent at first, then gaining solidity, a young woman sitting in a ring of video lights, her face perfect and exhausted, speaking to a camera about self-love while her eyes betrayed absolute emptiness. A man in designer athleisure collapsed on a marble bathroom floor, phone still clutched in his hand, the screen showing notifications of concern from followers who knew him not at all. A teenage boy standing on a balcony overlooking a city of screens, all of them showing versions of his family's carefully curated life, his face struggling between laughter and screaming. "Do you see them?" Shakespeare whispered. "I've always seen them," Wilde replied. "Every character I ever wrote was a ghost wearing the fashion of its time. Yours too. We don't create these people. We midwife them from the collective unconscious into the light where others can recognize their own faces." The ghostly figures moved through the room, acting out scenes that Shakespeare and Wilde hadn't yet written but somehow already knew. A family dinner where no one looked up from their phones. A daughter confronting her mother about the gap between the woman she performed and the woman she was. A father deleting his existence one post at a time, watching his digital self outlive his physical presence. Shakespeare stood, walking among the specters, his hand reaching toward a scene that dissolved at his touch. "We're writing tragedy." "We're writing truth," Wilde corrected. "Same thing, really. But will they want it? Will the algorithm favor it? Will it trend?" Wilde smiled. "My dear Will, we're not writing for the algorithm. We're writing for the ghost in the machine, the human heart that still beats beneath the metrics and the data. If we do this right, the algorithm will have no choice but to kneel." They wrote through the night. The laptop's battery died. Shakespeare laughed and lit more candles. Wilde's espresso went cold. He poured wine from a bottle that appeared on the Renaissance side of the desk. The script evolved beyond pitch deck and logline into something neither modern nor ancient, but perpetually present. The title emerged naturally as though it had always existed. The Performance. 8 episodes. 1 season. The story of a family performing happiness for an audience of millions, while privately annihilating each other with the weapons of silence, judgment, and the ultimate cruelty. Perfectly curated indifference. It would end with the youngest child live-streaming their family's final dinner, removing all filters, all edits, all performance, simply showing the truth. And in that truth, either redemption or destruction. Shakespeare and Wilde argued about which. Redemption, Shakespeare insisted. The possibility of grace, of seeing ourselves clearly and choosing to change. Destruction, Wilde countered. The truth kills everything it touches. That's its purpose. They compromised ambiguity. The live stream would end with the family looking at each other across the ruins of their performance, and the final shot would be their faces, incapable of lying anymore, but not yet capable of truth. The audience would decide what came next. "That's cowardly," Shakespeare said. "That's perfect," Wilde replied. Dawn threatened. Through the window, London's skyline began its daily resurrection. The ghostly scenes faded. The room's temporal confusion settled back into its strange equilibrium, half Renaissance, half modern, entirely impossible. They sat back, looking at the script glowing on the laptop screen and scattered across parchment pages. "It's good," Shakespeare said quietly. "It's better than good," Wilde said. "It's true. And truth is the only thing that never goes out of fashion, though it's always briefly unpopular." The door opened. A woman entered, mid-30s, immaculate in that way that suggested both yoga and anxiety medication, carrying a tablet and a coffee cup that announced her position in the creative hierarchy through its sheer size. She was the executive, the gatekeeper, the translator between art and market research. She stopped, looking at the 2 men in their anachronistic clothes, the room that shouldn't exist, the pages and screens filled with their collaboration. "I'm Sarah," she said carefully. "Development executive. We have an 11 o'clock?" "We have a show," Wilde said, gesturing elegantly toward the script. Sarah sat. She read. The room held its breath. 5 minutes passed. 10. Her expression remained professionally neutral, but her scrolling slowed. Stopped. Started again. Finally, she looked up. "It's brilliant," she said, and something human flickered beneath her executive polish. "It's absolutely brilliant. The voice is unique. The structure is daring. The characters are..." She paused. "They're haunting. Like watching people I know but haven't met. Like watching myself." Shakespeare and Wilde exchanged glances. But Sarah continued, and the room temperature dropped. "Ah," Wilde said, "the eternal but. The canyon between artistic truth and quarterly earnings." Sarah had the grace to look uncomfortable. "It's just, who's the target audience? Is it prestige drama? Is it dark comedy? Is it why a crossover? Our algorithm needs..." "Your algorithm," Wilde interrupted gently, "can go fuck itself." Sarah blinked. Shakespeare leaned forward. "What Master Wilde means, in his characteristically diplomatic fashion, is that some stories resist categorization. They exist not for an audience, but for the audience. Singular. Universal, the human watching, regardless of age or demographic or viewing habits. We're writing for the living and the dead," Wilde added, his smile sharp as starlight. "And those who stream between." Sarah stared at them, at the impossible room, at the script that seemed to glow slightly in her hands. "You're not actually William Shakespeare and Oscar Wilde," she said slowly. "Aren't we?" Shakespeare asked. "We're whoever you need us to be," Wilde said. "We're the voice that says, make this. Not because it will trend, not because the algorithm demands it, but because it's true, and truth is the only thing that justifies the violence of creating anything at all." Outside, London woke fully, the city of 1,000 years, and tomorrow morning, simultaneously ancient and newborn, stretched and yawned and began its daily performance. Sarah looked at the script again, then at her tablet where market research and viewing patterns and predictive analytics waited to tell her what was safe. She closed the tablet. "I'm going to greenlight this," she said quietly, "and I'm probably going to be fired, but I'm going to greenlight it anyway." Shakespeare smiled. "That's all any artist can ask, for someone to believe enough to risk something real. real. Besides, Wilde added, pouring wine into 3 cups, being fired is terribly fashionable. You'll dine out on this story for years. They toasted. Wine and espresso and morning light. The script sat between them, glowing with the particular radiance of something that might actually exist. Sarah left with the pages, walking backward as though afraid the room might vanish. When she was gone, Shakespeare and Wilde sat in the silence. Will it work? Shakespeare asked. Does it matter? Wilde replied. We wrote it. It exists. That's the only victory that counts. The laptop screen dimmed, entering sleep mode. The candles guttered low. Outside, London continued its eternal conversation between past and future, neither winning, neither surrendering. Shakespeare stood straightening his doublet. Wilde adjusted his jacket. They looked at each other across the centuries in the single night. Same time tomorrow, Shakespeare asked. Episode 2, Wilde confirmed. The family discovers that honesty is more brutal than any lie. Naturally, they faded then. Or perhaps the room faded around them, but the script remained, on screen and parchment, in the space between what was and what might be. Outside it, a notification appeared on Sarah's phone. Algorithm recommends 87% chance of success. She smiled and deleted it. Some things she'd learned resist prediction. Some things just are. The room waited, neither Renaissance nor modern, for the next scene to be written.